you're just joining us now, and as people start popping into the webinar, we'll be getting started. You are at the Much Ado About ADUs virtual tour, so if that's the flight you plan to be on, you're in the right place, and we'll be getting started in really just moments. We have about 50 people joining us now, so that everybody's just piling into this journey we're going to take together. So welcome everyone. We're just about to get started. My name's Rebecca Chaplin, and I am with AARP, one of your hosts of today's event. We'll give another few moments as you get situated. I'm sure many of you are already familiar with this platform of Zoom here, and of course you probably are aware of the Q&A and the chat features. Encourage you to use those. The chat feature is a great way to say hello to everyone, and please use that. And really a great way to build community among yourselves and among all of us. And then the Q&A is really specific for our presenters. So I just want to welcome you all, and we will go ahead and get started. We have about 68 people with us so far. We are expecting a few more. I hope that today goes without a technical difficulty, or at least minimal, and we're able to really enjoy the time together. We are joined together today by a common interest, and that is an interest in housing options for aging in place. As part of this journey today, we're going to explore ADUs, or accessory dwelling units. And I know that we have many types of people participating today, from homeowners to those seeking affordable housing, from community planners, ADU experts, and leaders in our city and county offices. So thanks for being here. And our hope is that today's virtual tour brings you all the information you need to get started or develop your journey to take the next step in the ADU journey. Before we hop into the tour, just that little bit of housekeeping. Here's what you can expect in today's event. We're going to start off with one of our national experts in accessory dwelling units, Cole Peterson. He's going to be joining us to give an overview of ADUs. Then we're going to move into the relationship between ADUs and aging in place. We're going to go right from there into our virtual tour, highlighting 5 different examples of ADUs, some really diverse examples of what that can look like. And after each of those tours, we are going to go ahead and, hey Todd, good to see you here. We just got started. Actually, you can turn off your video for now, and Todd will be joining us a little bit later, and that gets me to where we were going, which is going to be a panel discussion where you can ask your very real questions about ADUs to the experts in the field. Again, my name is Rebecca Chaplin. I am the Associate State Director with AARP North Carolina in the Mountain region. There are a group of dedicated individuals who work to bring this tour to you today, and I want to acknowledge the Housing Options for Aging in Place, or the HOPE work group. It's a subsidiary of Age Friendly Buncombe County under the leadership of Allie Climo. In addition, this virtual tour was brought to you by the Universal Design Institute, community planners such as Linda Giltz, Asheville City and Buncombe County staff, and of course our national expert, ADU expert, Cole Peterson. So let's bring Cole in right now. Cole is an ADU expert based in Portland, Oregon, who has helped to catalyze the exponential growth of ADUs in Portland and over the last decade through ADU advocacy, education, consulting, policy work, and entrepreneurship. Cole, take it away.
Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks for putting on this event. This is really exciting. We've done a couple virtual ADU tours like this, and in light of pandemic, this is kind of the best way to help people understand what ADUs are, what they look like if you haven't seen them before in person. Our goal is to help everybody who's on this call today to get inspired to potentially build one. There's a desperate need for more of these in a lot of communities, and so we hope that you feel better about the process of building one after today. I'm just going to really give like a 2-minute overview of what ADUs are, and then we'll get into the rest of the material today. So I'm going to share my screen, and here we go. So ADUs are secondary housing units on single-family lots. The actual structural form of an ADU is not actually the fundamental aspect of an ADU. It's the principle of what an ADU is that defines an ADU. So it's a secondary housing unit on a single family lot. This is a backyard detached cottage style ADU, and this is what most of us think of when we think of ADUs. This is a basement conversion ADU on the upper right. This is an ADU above a garage, and this is a garage conversion ADU. There's other forms of ADUs. In general, it's fair to say that most ADUs are in fact detached new construction ADUs, but they can come in a variety of structural forms, such as bump out ADUs, or you can do an ADU attached to a detached workshop, or an ADU in your attic, or in any number of structural forms. Why are people building ADUs? Well, in a study that we've done of like the statistical motivations of why people are building them, it really comes down to passive rental income potential and multi-generational household flexibility. Those are the two main drivers of why people are building them. This slide shows a nuclear family living in the primary house, renting out the greenhouse in the back in 2010. 2020, they become empty nesters, or sorry, 2020, they become a nuclear family with 3 kids and move into the ADU in the primary house because the kids need to have their COVID pod in the back and the parents need to escape to have their Zoom meetings away from their kids at night. And then 2040, the parents become empty nesters. They move into the downsize into the ADU and start renting out the primary house. And lo and behold, they had built that ADU to be aging, accessible, so they can now access it because there's no stairs to get into it. So this is kind of the quintessential life cycle of an ADU, and perhaps this speaks to maybe why you're interested in building an ADU as well. One of the things that I think is just worth knowing from a policy vantage is that ADUs are incredibly energy efficient and inherently reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This shows the greenhouse gas emissions associated with an average size house. And if you simply reduce the size of the house to a large ADU, that ADU will outperform a high performance average sized house. So I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but this is what really motivates me to, advocate for and inspire other people to build ADUs. So whether or not you care about climate change, if you are building one, you're addressing climate change. I could go on and on about this, but I'm not going to because of our limited time frame. So I'm going to pass it off to our next speaker, Richard Duncan. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. So Richard, come on out. Richard Duncan is the Executive Director of the Universal Design Institute and the Better Living Design Institute located in Asheville. Thanks, Richard.
Hi, thanks, Cole. That was a great introduction. And we're going to see if we can share. Are we sharing?
Yep.
Sure. You got it? Okay.
Yep.
So that was a great introduction. Our particular interest in Asheville for this event and this fall's activities really has to do with promoting accessory dwellings as they might be lived in or used by older adults. And so that's our particular focus. And we hope that you can get some information about that out of this presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about from the older adults perspective and then go into the design perspective for a few minutes. See if we can get this to work. So why are they good for older adults? One scenario might be maybe you don't have funds. Maybe you don't have funds to build a full-size retirement home. Maybe the expensive remodel that you were thinking about really doesn't seem like it's going to be working out for you. So you want to look for some other housing options. Maybe you actually need an accessible or universal home, and if you're like most other people, your home that you're living in now probably doesn't create that kind of an environment for you. Maybe you want to downsize anyway. Maybe now is the time you're thinking about how you might do it, and you don't want to maintain your home the same way you had to in the past years, and this is another opportunity that you might be able to take advantage of. And if you're choosing an ADU that may be relative to a family, it might be great to have the family on hand, to help you with daily tasks, to help with home maintenance, or even with transportation if you don't drive or would prefer not to drive. On the other side, if you're, again, associated with a family in your ADU, it may be that you have the opportunity to help them with a whole variety of tasks, including maybe even babysitting. So those are just some of the issues that you might be considering as you're considering an ADU for yourself, or maybe if you're the adult child of an older adult. So as Cole was alluding to, you can use an ADU yourself if you're an older adult. You might build an ADU as a detached or whatever kind of ADU you have on your property and move into it yourself and rent out your primary residence, or your family might be moving into the primary residence. And work the deal that way. You might be creating one now for rental income, and then later on, when you want to and need to, maybe then's the time for you to move into it. Or you may be creating an ADU for a caregiver right now. All those are possible. If you're a family, maybe you're going to create an ADU now, rent it out, and at some time in the future, you might be able to move your family member into it at a later time. So all those are scenarios that might work out well. You may have other issues and other options and opportunities of your own you can think of. From a universal design perspective, I think it's really important to be thinking about ADUs, accessory dwellings, with UD in mind, because the audience that we're thinking about and building for and accommodating is an audience of my age and older, who will inevitably acquire some different ability levels as we age and over time. So without doing this, you're probably limiting the utility of this ADU much more than you would otherwise, maybe constraining the independence of the individual or couple who might move into one, and maybe costing some money if you have to remodel it later on. So we want you to think about these things. 5 big issues now. There's a lot more on some of the resources we'll mention later on. You can get information about it, but a step-free entrance is crucial. Having a covered porch makes a big difference. We don't prefer ramps. I'll show you a couple here because it's hard to find images that don't have them, but really step-free that's a graded entrance is what we're looking for. Interiors, because these are so small, you don't have many doors, which is great. They're really kind of open plan, in some cases kind of studio apartments, and a 34, 36-inch wide door is really what you need to be thinking about there. Not too complicated. A usable bathroom, we'll show you images about what that looks like, because you need to have space in that bathroom for maneuvering yourself around if you're using a piece of mobility equipment. And we, in particular, we want to have you think about installing a curbless shower. Then universal design in kitchens also. We'll talk a little bit about storage in particular in this particular slideshow that we're showing you now. And then laundry, which can be a big space user, but is nothing that you should probably forget about. So step-free entrances that don't involve ramps is really what we're after. So you can have stairs as well, but a gently sloping pathway is really what we're looking for. There's a lot of different ways to create step-free entrances onto buildings of any kinds. And this particular example shows a retaining wall with kind of a bermed entrance going up, and then, of course, a covered porch, which is what we're always looking for with design. And it's, obviously step-free entrances are great for almost everybody, even great for movers when you're having things come and go from the house. That's why it's universal. One of the publications that we refer to and that we have as a resource that we'll share the link for you later is one by AARP. Cole's done another one for AARP that we also have a link to on our website. But these are images and some plans we have to kind of step you through some different sizes. In my world, and Cole may disagree, ADUs, and at least in Asheville, are like, really, you can't get much smaller than 400 feet and have a dwelling that can accommodate you from a universal design perspective. At the top end, and in Asheville in particular, maybe 800 feet is the limit on that. But here's one, no ramp coming in. Unfortunately, they could have done it. No step-free entrance that's graded as well. But this is 350 square feet, very, very small. They do have a porch, which is great. It's covered, which is also great. You want to get that doorway covered so you don't have water coming in. And in these kinds of tiny, tiny dwellings, it's really just a studio apartment with the bathroom taking up an unusually large percentage of the total square footage, because you've got to have that minimum space inside with the toilet in a corner and hopefully a curbless shower maybe in another corner, and a lavatory and a small but usable kitchen. All that works out fine. Going up in size, we have a 500 square foot ADU that actually has a ramp, which is good for them. We wish they'd graded the entrance, but it's bigger. You see, really in this case, you've got just bigger spaces, bigger bedroom, bigger bathroom, bigger kitchen, and maybe the opportunities for a eat-in kitchen as well, with a deck that's covered at the entryway. And you could also think in terms of these kinds of ADUs and others of things like Murphy beds, things like these now kind of very high-tech rolling storage bed units that sometimes incorporate desks or seating areas as well. You can imagine how this might roll back and forth within this house, eliminating the need for that closet perhaps and giving you more flexibility in the interior. I think I'm doing okay on time. And then here's the real giant of the grouping here, an 800 square foot ADU with my arrow pointing at the ramp again. Again, a porch, which is really useful. In this case, they squoze 2 tiny bedrooms in there with larger interior spaces inside that you can see. In this case, they've also thought about putting a tub in. We don't recommend that. If you have two bathrooms, not likely in an ADU, you can have one with a tub and one with a curbless shower. But curbless showers is really where we want to be going. And there's a lot of varieties of curbless showers. 1-piece units like this, 3-piece units, tiled showers. We're really talking about authentic curbless showers, not showers with small curbs or little curbs or not much of a curb, but really we want no curb at all. So quickly moving in our discussion here into kitchens, I mentioned storage as being key. A lot of storage happens unfortunately in high cabinets, which for a lot of folks is difficult even if they're ambulatory, and certainly if you're having issues reaching, issues getting around, if you're operating from a seated position, that works less well. So having a pantry style storage as options makes a big difference. Pull out storage works very well because you can get physical and visual access to it. And even now, very commonly you can get base cabinets with pull out drawers. Again, brings these stored items to you. And you can incorporate work surfaces at various heights in there as well. Finally, if you're gonna put in a floor standing stove or any kind of a range, front controls are really important. This particular unit has split the difference between front and back. We'd prefer to have all the controls on the front, or most of them, so that you're not reaching over hot burners, hot bubbling items to get at items in the back. Makes a bigger difference as we get older. And finally, into laundry. In the laundry area, this is kind of the gold standard. You know, side by front loading, front control, washer and dryer. This happens to be my mom who posed for us for this shot. They take up a lot of space, oftentimes not room in an ADU for that. This often is the go-to item for ADUs because they take up a small amount of space. Not so good long-term. Perhaps you start with this initially and then maybe you go to something like this, which is one of these units that a lot of people make now that are single unit combination units, a washer and dryer in one. You put in dirty clothes, you take out clean, dry clothes. We think that works well. It takes up a small footprint, obviously not for a big crowd. So briefly and in summary, when you're thinking about an ADU, for all the reasons you might have, plan for life's changes, please, and you'll be much happier in the long term. So that's us, and that's us, and that's the stuff that we do. And we can make this slideshow available as a PDF later on as well. That is it for me, and we'll turn it back to you.
All right. Well, that was a lot of information already. So whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and drop the screen share. There we are. And please feel free to write your questions into Q&A as they come up so that we can address those later. Richard, Linda, Cole, Chris, just quick show time. I want to see your faces for a minute, just so you can all see here who is on the planning team. And we are going to be guiding you through the virtual store that'll just start in a moment. You have met everyone here so far except for Chris and Linda. Linda Gilt is one of the event organizers and a lead for the Housing Options Aging in Place initiative for age-friendly Buncombe County. She has lived in Asheville for over 20 years and works with communities on urban and rural planning issues, and she's just a steadfast advocate for aging in community and aging in place. And Chris is the man behind the curtain here. He has served as the director at the Asheville Design Center since 2008, which merged with Mountain True in 2017, and he's a big part of this planning committee too. So without further ado, let's check out those ADUs. We will go ahead and hide ourselves so you can watch the video. I hope you enjoy.
I'm on TV.
Chris, we're not hearing the video.
Alzheimer's. At that time, she So we built this house for Mom. She was diagnosed in 2018 with some dementia and some early set Alzheimer's. At that time, she was renting about 3 miles up the road from us, and there was no cell service, so I couldn't really call her daily to check on her. The doctors at that point was just saying it was time to start thinking of the future and where she was going to live. And the best option for her and for us, and even my brother and sister, was close. So we just built her house on our property, which is, I don't know, 100 yards from our house. So we share the same driveway. And she's right close to us. We can just walk over. It takes 2 minutes to come over to her house, so we can keep an eye on her, and she can still have her independence. So she's very active, and she's not ready to slow down yet.
The importance of this is me being able to keep going and be independent, and having privacy is really good, but living beside my family also is very important, because I know they're there, and my grandchildren, they come over, and then I get to watch the sunset right in front of the house, and then the trees that are in front of the house, the mimosa, it's full of hummingbirds during the summer, and it's just awesome. See God's beauty every day.
My husband and I come up with the layout and design for Mom's house. My brother-in-law, which used to be a builder, he helped us with the dimensions and measurements for everything. And we hired out the framing, the foundation, block work, grading, plumbing, electrical. So we just hired all that out, and then we did several things ourselves. She is on our well, so she has shared well with us, but her own septic. And everything's working out really good so far. My husband and I took out a home equity loan to pay for Mom's ADU, and very simple process. The bank was very easy to work with. The total cost for her house was around $60,000. Very simple process with the bank.
I don't think they could have found a better place to put the house. I mean, it's just gorgeous.
Just that peace of mind of having her close, where I can help take care of her, but also she can help me still out with my children and my home. And here on the flower farm, she's such a great help, and I couldn't imagine not having her here at this state of her life, and even for the future. Just, we can take care of each other.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So the house is being used as it was intended, specifically for Mom. It is 512 square feet, so it's just enough space for her and her 3 dogs. And we put a larger crawl space under it so she could have room for storage. The layout is very simple. I think it's very easy for her to get around. With the walk into the living room, you got your kitchen right there, and there's a little hallway with her bathroom, laundry room, and the bedroom, and it's very simple. I think Mom's favorite part about her house is probably her front porch. She stays on that. If it's warm outside, you're going to see her eating her breakfast, lunch, and dinner on her front porch. The heating and air conditioner unit is a mini split unit, so it's very easy for her to use. It's got remote controls. We try to make it as easy for her and just to fit her lifestyle, because she's still very active. Yeah. Does it work for you?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Very independent.
If we had the opportunity to do this home again for Mom, we definitely would. There would be a few things that we would change as far as the layout and design, but we're very happy with how it turned out, and definitely do it again.
All right, everybody. So I hope that you found something interesting in there, an example of a county dwelling ADU, and maybe it connects with your own story. We're going to just do a quick poll now. So just hop back to your computer if you stepped away, or we hope you are paying attention there. And as we bring up our poll question, here it is. Did this homeowner have to hire a general contractor? And what type of financing was used to pay for this ADU? Answer that question. The countdown has begun. 9, 8, 7, 6. Keep your answers coming. You're doing great. 3, 2. Let's go. Want to see a few more of you answer. And okay, we will go ahead and close that poll, and we'll have Cole give us the results of this question. You're muted, Cole.
Thank you. All right, so did the poll results just disappeared. Did the homeowner have to hire a general contractor? Most people answered correctly. The answer is no. Homeowners did not have to hire a general contractor. Is it advisable for a homeowner generally to hire a general contractor? I would say as a third-party person, yeah, I would say in general, you probably should hire a third-party general contractor, but it's not necessary. I've general contracted a couple ADUs, but it is a lot of work. So something to consider, but you are not required to. The second question was what type of financing was used to pay for this ADU? Everybody answered, most people answered that correctly, home equity line of credit. That is in fact the most common way to pay for the bulk of construction. Either it's a cash out refinance or a home equity line of credit. These are really good options if you've been in your home for a few years and you've appreciated, or the value of your property is appreciated. Either of those two options are oftentimes how people pay for the bulk of the ADU. So that's it. Rebecca, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Cole. So as you can see, our transitions are nearly seamless, and now we are going to enter the next ADU tour, which is going to really feature a completely different type of experience. So Chris, if you want to go ahead and load video 2.
What? Sorry for that.
Close. So my mom, we're talking about moving her out to Asheville about 3 years ago. I have 3 children. I firmly believe in multi-generational living. And we really just wanted to be closer. And so we felt the tiny home model was low on the environmental impact, close living, and I really do believe it takes a village. And so that was our inspiration 3 years ago in 2017.
I had been living in Santa Fe, New Mexico for 30 years. And one time on the phone, Zach said to me with such a sweet voice, he says, "Mom, I want you closer." And so that was really the sentence that motivated me to really kick it into myself into gear to move. They came out to Santa Fe and packed me up and brought me to Asheville. What's important for me here is really to be with my grandchildren and watch them go through so many various stages of growth and to participate with that.
Our original project was a tiny home, detached in the backyard, 380 square feet. There was another project we did, which was a tiny home, and we wanted to kind of preserve as much as the backyard as possible. And so we did a lofted concept of a tiny home, and it was great. We designed it with the interior spiral staircase with an open loft plan, and Mom created a pretty decent sized kitchen.
One of the charming things with living so close is the children come down to my house and have tea. They come down sometimes. Bear would come down in the winter wearing his pajamas with his slippers, and I'd say, "Oh, aren't you cold?" No. So I give them tea, and so we sit and we talk and tell some stories, and then they run back up in their pajamas to their house. And so it's the closeness is really, I find, wonderful.
So the current project we're working on is a garage conversion, which is considered an attached ADU or accessory dwelling unit. And after going through a couple of prior projects, this iteration was the most economical. The projection of completion of projects from design period of maybe 5 to 7 weeks to breaking ground to completion, we're looking about 9 months. And that also just depends on the area that you're building, how busy are your subs, and also now, are there any supply chain interruptions just based on where the world is now. For one of the other projects, we worked with a local tiny home company. They definitely understand conceptually how to build smart, intelligent space at that micro level. For this current project that we have here, also a local builder of Asheville, who's been building for about 20 years. And I think the benefit of local in that respect is the crew. That's the true value of working with a professional, because they can bring in all of that talent. And the true benefit when both the real estate and the construction business is so busy is working with professionals that are local and that already have a crew and a team. He and I have really designed it from the get-go, and this is definitely the first time I haven't necessarily used a designer independent of a builder. I think what I've learned over multiple projects is the more you design up front, the better the transition into the project into completion will be. I did a home equity line of credit on the home, so kind of reinvesting the equity that's in this house. Utilizing existing space like this attached ADU and converting the garage. The budget is somewhere between $45,000 and $50,000. The tiny home model can really work for creating some long-term sustainable housing solutions for our local community. And also, as someone who is, interested in investing in real estate and potentially having sustainable rental income, it's a good source. Really, our projects have been solely on how do we bring family together? How do we allow some of our younger kiddos and so forth to be raised by, more than just your nuclear family. And so I think for us, that's been, the most important focal point. And I see myself probably doing it again, so.
So I hope you're feeling touched as I am when you see these real life stories, how ADUs are bringing families together, but also some of the nuts and bolts of what it takes. So Zach will be with us soon for the panel discussion, and we appreciate him and his mom for doing this. Let's post the next question, which we have here. What types of ADUs were featured in this video? You can choose more than one. There are more than one appropriate answers to this question. Please go ahead and vote now, because we want to keep you engaged and make this a real interactive experience. We'll count down 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Get your vote in now. 1. And we'll close the poll. Okay, so I'm going to share the results, and Linda's going to speak a little bit about this topic.
Okay. Okay, great. So there's a few different types of ADUs. I think people got that pretty much correct. The first two that Zach showed were tiny homes of different styles. The first one built, and then the second one really tailored towards his mother's needs. They're both good examples of that type of a detached ADU. And then currently building right now is a garage ADU that's really part of the garage building itself, which is that first thing that most people noticed, to meet their needs as they moved from one property to another property. So it might have been a little confusing as you were watching it, but I think each time they probably learned more about what they might like to see in the design. So it really shows you kind of how the different styles and different types can be used, and how the use of an ADU can change over time, from a family member using it to maybe a renter using it. I think the other thing about this was so nice to hear Zach's mother and how happy she was to be able to be there with her grandchildren and her son, and they could really spend some quality time together. So that's a big reason why people are building ADUs today. Thanks.
And thanks to you, Linda, for helping us to think about that more fully. I hope you're enjoying our little quizzes after each video, which will go to video number 3, a completely different approach and style. And we'll go to that now. Thank you, Chris.
We originally built it for Dolly's mother, and instead of staying in one of the bedrooms, we decided to build a cottage for her, so as a separate residence.
And so we thought, why not renovate, which is an understatement, rebuilding almost this property here, and she's right behind us.
Dolly started taking care of her mother really gradually in about 2000, and by 2008, I guess, she had gotten to a point where we were calling all the time on the phone to Baltimore, and we just decided that she should be here more than she's up there.
Initially, when she first came here, she lived in our house inside here, and it was very comfortable for her, and so it was really quite good. It's really quite good for her. Now, this house that we live in is a large house. It can get a little difficult to navigate if you're slowing down.
And she had her own house, in Baltimore.
Right.
And so going into a bedroom didn't make, it was good for a visit, but not to live. And building the cottage was a transition between the two. It's a kind of compromise between the two, of living in our own house as opposed to living in a bedroom in our house. The cottage was built on the footprint of the carriage house that was here. And the carriage house was a 2-car garage with maid's quarters on top of it. And the city prohibited us from expanding beyond the footprint of the carriage house because of the proximity to the property line with our neighbors. So we have 900 square feet. We had a cathedral ceiling put in on the 2nd floor, and we put a wraparound porch on it so she would have access without having to walk outside in the yard. It feels bigger than what it actually is.
The first floor has a full kitchen, refrigerator, stove, microwave, little table, seats maybe 3 people. That's in the kitchen area. There is the washer and dryer. There's a little couch that you can rest in. There's a TV that pulls out from the wall, and there's a full bath and shower. You go upstairs, and up there is another full bath. So as you get to the top, it's another full bath. And then the bedroom is a pretty large space because it covers the kitchen. There is a large television set and a couple of small coffee tables, a small couch, and a big wardrobe. Yes, you can hang up your clothes, and some drawers.
We had a sitting area installed, and it's important because it was one of the observations. It wasn't even a complaint of people who were our guests who would be staying there through Airbnb and through guest services. But the second reason was for our grandchildren. I don't know if you remember Harry Potter, but Harry Potter lived under the stairs. And so it kind of inspired us to put the sitting area under the stairs. I think there are a couple of things I would have done differently. One of the things I would change would be the size of the windows to let more light in, particularly upstairs. I regret not having larger windows put in.
A ramp, something that allows the stairs not to be such a challenge, could have been a possibility. I'd like to think we learned from the restrictive in the city. We could not do that. And so it matters if someone wants to build something for their mother, an older person, such and such, then you have to handle that. You think about how you might do that.
Also, I think that another thing is that I would have started with a seating area downstairs instead of adding it later, because it was something that added to the intimacy of upstairs and downstairs as separate things. I still can't figure out how we could have put a second bedroom in, but if I could have, I would have.
Another great example and another detached ADU. So quick, get to your computers to answer our next poll question. The student in you should love this, and we hope it increases your learning. The video 3 poll is now live. What was the intended use of this ADU? The intended use. And what feature would have made this unit better for use by an older adult? Those are your 2 poll questions, and we would just, love for you to weigh in, and then we'll have a little commentary as we have from our housing options for aging in place commentators. And they will provide some context for this. We'll count down in 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, come on, a couple more of you want to see a vote. 1, and we'll end the poll. Great job, everyone. Let's share these results. And we'll have Richard and Linda speak to this.
Okay, I'll start off with the first question. Again, at ADU for mom, so mom could be close, and in this case especially so they could help care for her and provide more assistance to her, but allow her to have her place of her own. Mentioned building on the footprint of the old cottage house that was on the property, and that was really to meet the city's rules for setbacks and possibly for size. Towards the end, they mentioned using it as a rental unit after mom passes away. Again, the life cycle of an ADU. And I just wanted to bring up really briefly, that we're focusing this event on accessory dwelling units, secondary dwelling units, but they can be used for a number of purposes. And one of them is for long-term rental or short-term rental. I just want to be aware that the rules for short-term rentals in County are different depending on which city you live in and if you're out in the county. So we can go into that more later if people have questions about that, but I just wanted you to kind of know that there's some nuances, whereas Buncombe County allows short-term rentals of entire dwelling units in any of their zoning districts, but in Asheville there's a number of restrictions on them, and they're not allowed in many places in the city as entire dwelling units. And that's all I'm going to say about that for now. I'll hand it over to Richard.
Yeah, okay. So the second question is what feature would have made this unit better for use by an older adult? And I think people clicked the option if there weren't any steps to get into the front door ramp. And that's true. Also, there could have been interior changes as well. You'll notice in these videos, we're not able to feature a lot of very intentional adult-friendly design features in the various ADUs. The stories are compelling, the uses are compelling, but from a design perspective, not so much. They would have put a ramp on, I think, if they thought maybe a little bit ahead of it, and probably could have worked it out within the very kind of significant constraints that they had in the lot and their buildability that they had on that particular space. But that would have made a difference. And they could have had, as they were saying, if they had a bedroom downstairs, they could have had maybe a downstairs that was more accommodating with maybe a caregiver space upstairs. That might have worked out for them as well. But yeah, having a step-free entrance would be crucial, and I think very significant. So that's all for that particular video. We can go to the next one.
Thanks, Richard and Linda. We'll go to the next video and a new example.
So the story for where we got the idea for our backyard dwelling is a good friend of ours named Clay, who helped us do some remodeling in our basement for an Airbnb, put the idea in our head. So he was our inspiration. And he convinced us that we had enough property and that we would be able to make extra income off of putting an additional dwelling unit in our backyard. The process that it took from the first idea, so the length of time that it took from the initial idea to now somebody living in our unit, was approximately about a year and a half total. We kind of played around with the idea, and then between getting the loan and the construction and everything, right about a year and a half. The design process was a mutual effort between myself, my husband, and Clay, who was the gentleman that did the construction for us. And we made up a design of what we wanted, and then he tweaked it according to what was appropriate for construction and what was feasible for our area and what was most cost effective. Originally, we started with a 1-bedroom design, and we turned it into a 2-bedroom design to have more options for people who wanted to move in there. Inside of the house, we have 2 bedrooms, we have a bathroom, we have a loft that is accessible by a ladder, and we have a small kitchen that connects to a living room, dining room area. The process to get the permits and to figure out what we needed to do, what we could do and were not allowed to do, was we simply went down to the city and we spoke with somebody down at the offices, and she wrote it all out for us, such as the unit itself could not be 70% bigger than what our house was. So it had to be in proportion with our house. It also had to be at least 10 feet away from any property lines. So the square footage for the house is 600 square feet total, plus about 80 feet for the loft. Some special design features that we chose to add to the unit was to have high ceilings. Because it's only 600 square feet, we wanted to give the appearance of it seeming bigger and larger. So when you walk in, because we have high ceilings, it does feel like you are in an area that is larger than 600 square feet. Construction, surprisingly, only took about 6 months. We started in March and we had somebody move in August. Since this was a new project, if we had an opportunity to do this all over again, there's not a whole lot that we would do different. There are a few things that we might tweak in the design, such as where we place the door in comparison to where we needed to put the fridge, where we might put the stove, little design features, but overall, there's not a whole lot that we would change. So for future use, we do plan to eventually one day move into it. We would like to one day maybe retire there and rent out our house. We've also talked about our daughter moving into it when she's old enough, when she turns 18, and if she wants to be out of the house but still close to us, then that's a great opportunity for her. She has big plans and dreams to already move in. We also do have family members, such as my brother, who is in a situation where he's looking for a place to live. We've talked about, in a year or so, him potentially coming and living here. So we hope to have it available for numerous options, such as renting it for income or have the option to use it for ourselves or for family members. So in order to finance this house, we had to get our house refinanced so that we could pull out some money from it, and we had to go through a process of getting our house appraised, which was a smooth process. And then after we were able to pull out some money, and after all the construction and the driveways and all of the many tons of rock that we had to have put in for the driveway, it was all said and done about $85,000. So once we finished with the house, we then decided that we were going to rent it out, and we weren't sure if we were going to get a good response or a bad response, and we were pleasantly surprised to find that we got a great response. And we found that we either got young couples or older couples. We didn't actually get families, and we weren't sure what we were going to get. Because of the high interest, we were fortunate enough to be very selective in who we chose to move into our unit.
And there we have it, another showcase, another example, another story about the life cycle of the ADU. And we'll take our poll question and invite you all to hop on over to your screens and your keyboards so that we can get your input on this. How long did it take to get the ADU completed from conception to move-in ready? Do you recall? And what are the planned uses for this ADU? Again, that can be more than one option, so please start your voting. We're counting down. There we go, they're coming in. 8, 7, 6. Get your votes in now. We like seeing about 50 people weigh in. That's neat to get at least that many. I think we're at 30, so if you haven't voted yet, please do. And we will go to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, thanks everybody for voting, and we'll share these. It looks like the results have been shared. Cole.
Awesome. All right. So the first question here is like the key one for everybody to wrap their heads around who hasn't been through this before. This is not a small undertaking. Building an ADU is a huge life-changing undertaking in a positive way, but also it is a huge, difficult, stressful, time-consuming, expensive, complicated process. So I want everybody to get that. And it's exemplified by the fact that this project took a year and a half, which is actually about average. Like a year to year and a half for homeowners is a realistic time frame to do this, and it is like stressful the entire time. So I don't mean that to put a damper on anybody, but I think it's realistic. I think it's good to have a realistic expectation that this is going to be the second biggest project you'll ever do in your life after having a child. And if you've never had a child, this will be the first biggest project you'll have ever done. So so that's how long this project took. Second question is, what are the planned uses for this ADU? Well, we mentioned, we've been talking about the flexibility of ADUs. In fact, in this project, they had all of these different intentions in mind, as was, you guys answered correctly on that, which is all of these different things are things they're going to do with this ADU. And then the last question was what type of financing was used. I mentioned earlier that these two methods are the most common methods, cash out refinance or home equity line of credit. In this case, cash out refinance. So that means, hey, their value over the last 5-10 years has increased. Rather than dipping into a second mortgage, taking a home equity line of credit, they just refinance the first mortgage. They took out cash, so they increased their primary mortgage. They got it locked into a new, presumably very low interest rate. We're at historically low interest rates, which allowed them to take advantage of that low interest rate and use that cash for whatever they want. They could buy a Ferrari, they could put a kid through college, but instead they built an ADU, which, unlike buying a Ferrari and unlike other investments you could do, will actually give them rental income. So it's a pretty astute investment for them. All right, that's it.
All right, thanks. I hope you enjoyed that commentary. Thanks to Cole. And now we are going to move to our fifth and final video tour. Chris?
We specialize in building small footprint homes. These homes were designed to fit within Asheville City standards of being a standalone ADU, or we've taken it one step further and have created whole workforce communities of them. So this particular unit is a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath house. The entire footprint is 16 by 24, so it's 384 square feet. And combined heated living spaces, I think this one's about 812 square feet. The ones that we've built around town can be designed to be standalone as a standalone house on a lot with a main house, can be built as an ADU in someone's backyard and complies with all the city zoning standards, or they can be clustered together. We've helped people find land and build houses for them as either first time or step down homes. They've had their land already, and we've helped them put ADUs on it. Or we've now moved into developing the communities. And the communities really came from the lack of available affordable land in town. As an ADU, we're now designing a whole separate standalone line of small footprint studios called escape pods that can really be designed for anything, whether it's for aging in place or for homestays, which is common use now. With the shortage of labor, and the cost of materials, the actual cost of construction has gone up. The other way that I can help relieve that is to move towards fabrication. We've started a little house factory in town. So we're actually prefabricating the wall units, the stud wall that has the window in it, that has the sheathing on it, and even goes as far as having the siding on it. Everything here would kind of flat pack to pack on a truck. We'd stand them up, put our roofing or flooring in, and then kind of move on the next level. The way zoning works, especially here in Asheville, if you build a house, you have to provide the parking. For this 384 square foot house, I've got to provide 2 parking spaces that are 18 by 9 each. That's 18 by 18 parking. That's almost as much as the footprint of the house. One of the ways that we've worked with that in some of our builds is we put the parking under the house. If you have a garage, people put their stuff in it and they don't park their cars in it. And when you have a small, dense site and you really are relying on that parking below the house, we leave the doors off, we make it so it can't be a garage, so people then use it for parking. I've had now 3 projects where I've actually been able to carve off a piece of the backyard of a lot I own, where I own the house up front. I wanted to carve off the backyard where I traditionally would have had to build an ADU. The lot wasn't big enough to comply to true zoning standards where you can divide it in half. So we were able to get separate title and a separate PIN number assigned by the city for the house up front, get a separate tax parcel and PIN number assigned for the lot in the back, able to either sell that off or put a whole different deed of trust on that wasn't affected by the main house. A very common zoning in the city of Asheville is called RM. So it means residential multifamily. And there's an 8 number or 16 number or 6 number. And what that means is you're just allowed to build multi-houses on that same parcel. This little trick of like carving off these backyard pieces allows you not to go over the density that's allowed, but just a tool for how to meet what is already zoned for. We take advantage of the slopes in the city by building a lot of daylight basements. And those daylight basements then can be used for homestays, apartments. They can be used for guest apartments where they're full apartments and with full bathrooms, full standalone. And then we've also built ones that are attached on the side. Primarily, we're now asked to do this for homestays, but the use for aging in place, it could be used the same way, that you can design. We've actually designed one that it was for someone's art studio now, but it can later be used if they're, when their parents might need to move in with them. It's designed in a way that it's at a ground level, or there's a place a ramp can go to it, and then the living is all on one level.
Okay, and that was our final video. We have one more poll question before we move to the panel. Some of you may have heard this event went to 1 and others till 1:30. It does go till 1:30 today. Hope you can stay with us as long as possible. But in the meantime, what'd you learn here? Which development methods are the best way, is the best way to build an ADU? What types of ADUs were discussed in this video? We will have Barry with us for the panel discussion, which is great, following this poll in this video and the explanation of this video. So please chime in with your thoughts, and we're all learning some new information today, and we'll give it 5 more seconds. So get your answers in now. 4, 3, 2, awesome, great. It's good to hear from so many of you. Let me show those results have been shared, and we are going to invite Richard up to talk to us more about these responses.
Hi. Yeah, so Barry talked about a lot of different kinds of projects. He does stick-built work, of course, and he'll be here to join us in a couple of minutes so he can tell us more about it. And he was commenting on how he was experimenting with kind of panelized construction. This is part of my multi-generational family here. And we would even expand that further. Stick-built, panelized. You could even do, modular. You could hoist in entire small dwellings that were built someplace else and brought onto the site. Ways to speed up construction and speed up the development process. You can stand over there. So in terms of, so there's no single best way is what you all decided, and that's actually true. And so the types of ADUs that were discussed included the attached, the internal above the garage, as well as the detached new construction ADUs. A whole lot of varieties that you've seen in these series of videos and in discussions we've had before So we can move on now, I think, Rebecca, to the next phase.
All right, and I think I'm sure I'm not the only one who found some joy in seeing your grandson there, and talk about aging in community and aging in place and all of that. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to bring on the panel. If you have a question for our panel attendees, please go ahead and type them in, and I'm going to go ahead and bring everybody in. And if you're a panelist, you can go ahead and turn on your video. We've had some great questions in the chat, so it's just going to take me another moment here to bring everybody in. Thanks for sticking with us. It's really exciting to have you all here. And let's see. And Andrew, we need to get Andrew. Okay, after I get Andrew, am I missing anyone else here? Or does it look like I've got everybody? This is such an esteemed group. I want to make sure that I've captured everyone. And Jillian and Andrew, you can go ahead and turn on your cameras when you're ready to. Of those I haven't already introduced, I want everyone to meet Barry. Barry, you saw in the final video, he is a North Carolina licensed general contractor and real estate broker and current chair of the Asheville Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. He is founder and CEO of Compact Cottages, which has built 85+ small footprint homes and ADUs in the Asheville area. He also happens to be the owner of Thirsty Monk, an Asheville-based brewery and pub chain. He's certified by fellow panelists Cole Peterson as an ADU specialist, and he coincidentally built other fellow panelist Todd Oakledge-Cheney's home. Wow, look at that. There's a lot of interconnections here, and let's say hi to Todd as well. Todd serves as the Director of Planning and Urban Design for the City of Asheville, where he is responsible for leading sustainable growth, promoting equitable development, and shaping the built environment. We have Andrew here, and Andrew is the Buncombe County Affordable Housing guy. He does a lot more than that, but he is your go-to, and that he focuses on affordable housing and production. And then we also have been joined by Jillian. Thanks for coming with us today, Jillian, a planner with Buncombe County Planning and Development Department, and has over 18 years of local government experience. And you know what? I see that I didn't bring Zach in, so let me quickly grab Zach, because you saw Zach in one of those videos, and Zach has always valued minimalism. He wants to change family dynamics, allowing for multi-generational living. ADUs and tiny homes have been a great avenue to explore these topics and seeing how they interact with his love of real estate and career in real estate finance. Woo, that was a lot. So let me start with one of my softball questions, and then while you're answering that, we'll move to some of our guest questions. The first is, what are the current rules around ADUs and short-term rentals in the county and the city? This is a big question, and I think many people are looking for clarity here. Raise your hand if you want to go first on this one.
I think it's either me or Todd, so I can go first for the county. We actually do not define ADUs in our ordinance. We just, in general, allow more than one dwelling unit in all zoning districts. We have one zoning district that only allows one dwelling unit, and we are going to try to get that to go away. So we truly do not have single family zoning in the county. You can actually do up to 4 units without any additional approval, so 4 separate single-family homes in a lot of our zoning districts, as long as you meet your required setbacks and you have access to water and sewer. We really try through our ordinance and through our long-range planning to focus in on increasing densities in the areas that allow it, where there's access to transportation and public water and sewer, and protecting our steep slopes and our more environmentally sensitive areas.
That was well stated. Todd, what do you have to add about the city of Asheville?
Sure. We do define accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, in what we call our UDO, which is our Unified Development Ordinance. And that includes all of our subdivision regulations and all of our zoning requirements in the city. ADUs are permitted within all of our residential districts and some of our commercial districts. such as a CB1 or CB2 or some of our office zoning districts. And we generally require or allow up to one ADU to be permitted on a lot along with your primary residence. We do have some other requirements for the size of ADUs in the city. And typically that maximum size of an ADU is 800 square feet or 70% of the size of your primary residence. And again, just trying to look at it from a design perspective and the scale of an ADU compared to the primary dwelling unit on the lot. If the ADU is part of the house, it may be in a basement or it's attached to your home, it could go up to 1,000 square feet. So those are our current kind of size restrictions. We do have some other requirements for ADUs for setbacks and things like that. Unlike other home or primary residence on your lot, you can build an ADU a little bit closer to your side or rear property line. So we have, I think, generally a 6-foot minimum setback to your ADU on your lot. And we do have parking requirements as well, and that's something definitely would love to talk a lot more about, something that we could look at in the future to maybe revise our parking requirements. But right now we require 1 parking space for an ADU in addition to your primary residence on the lot. So again, I think that's definitely an area that we can look at in the future and try to make it easier to help facilitate building more ADUs in the city.
Thank you, Todd. And that was a great overview. I just want to zoom right into that STR piece, that short-term rental, and kind of where the distinguishing factors are for what can be considered a short-term rental versus an ADU. I know that question comes up frequently. Do you have anything to add on that, Todd?
Yeah, great question. In the city of Asheville limits, for the city limits, we allow something called a homestay, which can only be permitted in your primary residence, your main residence on the site. A homestay acts like a short-term vacation rental, except that you're allowed to rent up to 2 rooms within your primary residence on your lot. We currently do not allow ADUs to be used as a homestay or a short-term vacation rental. And that's something that we're looking to clarify with some new proposed language to our homestay ordinance soon. That should be coming up soon to be reviewed by our Asheville City Council. But again, we don't currently allow ADUs to be used for a homestay or a short-term vacation rental.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that piece. I just want to see if Andrew has anything to add here. Make sure you get a chance to chime in if you have something to add.
Sure, and I don't have anything really substantial to add from what Jillian said or Todd. I would say that what we do to support affordable housing and what most local units of government do is to be very intentional with our dollars. And so often accessory dwelling units operate in kind of the periphery of our actions. They are part of a kind of comprehensive strategy or a larger strategy to affect affordability for a lot of people. But as far as financing that kind of flows through desks like mine, it's not quite as common. We can perhaps talk about that a little bit later as well.
Okay, thanks. Does anyone else have anything to add on that question of short-term rentals before we move forward? Okay, yeah, Linda.
Hold on. There I am. Yeah, just a note that, I guess in all these cases, permits are required so that, if you're going to do a short-term rental, you need to register that and get, have a permit for that. So they are really trying to track that use in both places. And I think Jillian said that short-term rentals are allowed in secondary dwelling units or any dwelling units, right?
They are. In all zoning districts in the county, you can have up to 2 short-term rentals. So if you had a primary house and then an ADU on a structure, you could use them both as short-term rentals. Once you hit 3, whether they be together on one lot or on 3 separate lots adjacent to each other, we consider it what's called a vacation rental complex, and there are more requirements.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great to know. And let's move to another question. This is coming up in both the chat and also kind of in one of our videos. What are some other creative ways that owners have addressed parking requirements for ADUs? It came up in the chat. Let's see, can parking be within the setbacks? And I know Barry shared kind of a creative example about, you know, square footage and using parking. So what are some of the other creative ways that an owner has addressed parking requirements for ADUs? Who would like to respond to that? Barry, go, it's you. Take that softball.
Yeah, okay, I'll unmute. Yeah, I mean, parking, obviously, as I brought up in the video, is one of the biggest issues. You know, there's a main house usually has at least a 2-car parking requirement, and then an ADU has a 1-car parking. So it gets really tricky, especially when a lot of these small footprint ADUs, the parking spaces can be as large as the structure. So putting parking below is one solution that certainly doesn't really help with aging in place. Parking is allowed in setbacks. Todd, you may want to clarify in on that a little bit, but parking is allowed in setbacks. And then there are some zoning districts that do allow on-street parking, and some within, I think it's within the proximity of the central business district, waives parking requirements. But Todd might be better to pick up that next part.
Sure, thanks, Barry. Right, you can park within the setbacks. I believe there is like a minimum distance of like a driveway to the side property line. It's very minimal though, but we do allow shared driveways oftentimes, and where you could share a driveway that exceeds the property boundary, and you share that driveway with your adjacent neighbor. As Barry mentioned, in the city of Asheville, we do have reduced parking requirements for dwelling units when you're within a certain proximity of our downtown or our central business district. So I think that's within 1 mile. And we have some other areas too around Tunnel Road that satisfy that requirement. I think, you know, again, going back to parking, we do hear a lot from folks like Barry trying to build smaller homes and ADUs in the city, that our parking requirements are often a barrier to building those types of units. And we often look to cities like the city of Portland and Seattle to get guidance on, well, what they're doing to remove barriers to ADUs or to infill housing or missing middle housing. And I think going forward in the future, we ought to probably revisit our parking requirements for ADUs and other types of dwelling units within the city of Asheville to see if we can reduce those in certain areas of the city, or like in Portland, they actually have no parking requirements for many of their single family and other types of housing units and housing types.
Great. That's a great segue actually to some of the work this group is doing with a memo of recommendations, which I know you've already seen in collaboration with Cole, on how we can continue to make ADUs more accessible and available for people. I see a question here that's interesting to me, a couple here in the Q&A. Are mobile homes, ADUs, and tiny homes with and without wheels regulated by DMV or non-DMV agency in North Carolina? So once you add wheels, how does that affect things? I see Cole's unmuted himself.
Yeah, I'll take a quick kind of national look at this issue. So there's been a lot of coverage of tiny houses on wheels, and the nomenclature is confusing because people might use the term tiny house to describe a small ADU, but I like to kind of not use that term because it confuses things. So there's ADUs which are stick built on foundations typically, and those are concrete foundations that go below grade. And you kind of have to do that to have a residentially permitted structure on a property. Tiny houses on wheels are it's going to vary by jurisdiction, but by and large, they're not really legal to live in anywhere in the United States in residential zones. And I, as an advocate, am very much like pushing jurisdictions to loosen those regulations. But in general, with some variation and nuance, you generally can't live on things that are not residential structures in municipalities. I would love for Jillian or Todd to correct me if that's not the case in your jurisdictions, but that's in general how you have to think about these things. The one and only place you can live in these kinds of things tends to be RV parks, or when you're camping, essentially.
Sorry about that. Okay, that's very useful. Is there anything that Todd or Jillian or Andrew want to add to that? Do have a lot of questions coming in that are really great. Okay, let's just look at this one. Does anyone see a problem with focusing on ADUs for short-term rentals versus providing housing in community such as ours with limited housing options? And I think you kind of distinguished, especially in the city limits, that ADUs cannot be used for short-term rentals. There is a distinction between those things, but I just want to see if anyone else has anything to add around the affordable housing options and kind of how this fits into the milieu. Anyone have?
So from the county's perspective, we just made the decision regarding short-term rentals probably, I'm going to say 6 or 7 years ago, and it definitely was part of the discussion. How does that affect affordable housing? It's something Andrew can tell you we're always thinking about in terms of our ordinance creation, given the affordable housing issues not only Asheville but Buncombe County has. And the regulations are very loose for short-term rentals right now. I don't know if that'll stay where they are. We might reevaluate that at some point and decide to strengthen those regulations more similar to what the city did.
Barry?
I'll say as someone, as having trying my best to build affordable housing in town, I've noticed more and more, we get more and more requests for building a short-term rental to how it comply to city standards, which is a homestay, for the sole purpose of making the home affordable for somebody. Because land prices have gotten so expensive that it's really difficult for a normal person in Asheville to afford a standalone home on a lot. So building an ADU actually adds, as a short-term rental, adds an income stream that helps them afford to live here. So I've found it's a tool that's being used to help with homeownership more and more. I'm getting asked more and more about how to design houses with homestays in them, because it's really just spreading an income going from the hotels to individuals, and then individuals then can afford homeownership. But I mean, it's more than half of my projects now are being asked to have homestays so they can do short-term rentals just so they can afford to live in the city.
Great, and that brings up a related question. We have just a few more minutes with the panel, but it's about financing and financing for ADUs, if there are specific types of requirements for that, and how people can have access to the appropriate financing. Zach, you might want to speak to that one if that feels appropriate.
Sure, yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It's one that has multiple options. I think Cole did a good introduction on the front end. You have a refinance option if you have some equity to do a cash out. That stabilizes the financing and usually locks it into long-term permanent financing. But for a shorter term solution and a quick, inexpensive way, the home equity line of credit, which is essentially a second lien position that falls in on there, it allows the homeowner to quickly tap that equity and reinvest it into an ADU project or a garage conversion or something like that. I know of another local institution here that does really tiny home new construction projects. And so you can actually do a purchase of a lot and build and do a new construction. And new construction financing is, sometimes limited and more challenging, a little bit more costly, and especially during COVID and other things, has become less available, but a local regional bank is providing that type of solution too. So other than, of course, the obvious cash, but financing options, definitely are helpful if you have existing housing stock and have some equity to tap.
Great, and Cole, you have something to add?
Yeah, so Zach's correct. Cash out refi, home equity line of credit is one bucket. There's like 5 buckets. It's always going to be a mix of the following. It's those 2 options, then it's cash savings, then it's family loans, then it's non-secured lines of credits, then it's personal loans, and it's usually a combination of those different things. And then there's a couple other kind of forthcoming, I mean, there are other ways to do it that are using conventional renovation loan financing, but they're far more complicated. So I think we'll leave that idea aside. But right now it's kind of, think of it, this is always going to be a struggle for people, and you're going to always have to patchwork together funding in order to do this, because it's a very, very large money you have to come up with to do this. And unlike buying a house, you can't just pay down 5% of this. You have to come up with all the cash all at once for this.
Todd, do you have something to add?
Yeah, absolutely. From a zoning perspective, there was a strategy or recommendation that I came across recently from Kronberg Architects, is a firm out of the city of Atlanta, and they've assisted the city of Atlanta a lot in looking at their zoning regulations surrounding ADUs and missing middle housing. And there's one idea that I think we could look at in the city is our flag lot requirements. You know, a flag lot, if you're not familiar with that, you have a tiny sliver of land. It looks like a flagpole, and then it opens up in the back of the property into a wider, larger depth kind of parcel that looks like a flag. Typically, from an urban design perspective, we kind of discouraged that for many years in the city because it took housing away from the street, and when we're trying to create a more walkable, pedestrian-friendly environment, we felt like that was in conflict with that value or that principle. But the more we look at this, affordable housing, infill housing, these are things that are really a priority for us right now. I think we ought to revisit our flag lot requirements and maybe make it a little bit easier to build on flag lots and build ADUs on flag lots, with the idea that that flag lot might be able to be subdivided from the rest of the parcel and become its own fee simple property. And that might make it easier to acquire conventional, loans from a mortgage lender.
Andrew, you have something to add to that?
And I would add, and I do want to clarify, the world I work in is explicitly affordable housing. We have kind of our own language and our own industry a bit. The vehicles that we're going to produce potentially ADUs through our kind of affordable housing financing at the local level are going to be, we probably do have some folks from these entities on the call, but it's going to be from our single family home, our affordable single family home producers, your habitats, your mountain housings, your land trusts, and building that ADU in compatibility with a new unit. But I would say there is an inherent challenge, and Jillian and I have spoken about this a little bit, is that you can do as much as you can do to kind of reduce the barriers to producing ADUs. And then on the other hand, in the world I inhabit, you have to then really induce the development. And that, in a world of very limited resources that we work in, is the dollar for dollar need for these units going to be greater than perhaps a 9% multifamily tax credit project? Is there going to be a demand from our kind of traditional affordable for sale buyers? And so we have to kind of calibrate to that. I think there are just a lot of inherent challenges, again, within this kind of explicitly affordable housing world that I work in, that causes you not to kind of see these units being produced. Programmatically, we're not opposed to them at all, but I would say, from my desk, where we're going to see this is that a group, like I said, a mountain housing, a land trust, or a habitat is going to come and attempt to pilot that speaks to kind of what Barry's point was, that this is something that could stabilize the income of a local homeowner. And then it would also have to, again, meet the dollar for dollar value of a comparable project. Is it worth a greater investment on us to produce an ADU versus supporting a multifamily project? It's complex. I mean, there's this whole kind of subterranean world of financing that works beneath this, and we're a subcategory of it. And where we can and would challenge, I guess, like I said, the mountain housings and others of the world, if they see a potential for this and a need to bring it to us. But until this point, we really haven't produced it much locally.
And I will say, I have run into a lot of developers planning these type of developments or wanting to do ADUs that run into problems with financing and the project falls apart. So as much as I think planners advocate for missing middle, the city of Asheville has, we have and advocate for ADUs, there's a barrier there with financing that is stopping people from doing it.
This is a robust conversation, so I want to appreciate the intricacies of it, and obviously we won't get to it all here, so I think it's time to take it to the next steps and where people can go when they want to get more information and take any next steps. So I'm going to go ahead and move our panelists back into attendees with my sincere thank you for your time and engagement, investment in this process. You have been beyond value that could be expressed with words. And we will have Richard and Linda kind of close us out with some thoughts about next steps.
Yeah, this has been great. I've learned a lot of things myself. I hope that you have too. Richard and I are working together with AARP and the Asheville Design Center and pulling together some public and private sector representatives for meetings and discussions to look at some of the barriers that have been mentioned and opportunities, and also talk about some next steps that might make it easier to build ADUs and ultimately increase the number of ADUs that we have in the city and the county. We're in the process of developing a set of recommendations for the city and the county from all this work and this tour, and also from the consultation that we have with Cole Peterson and some other research that we're doing. And I guess in the beginning, the housing options for aging in place, HOPE, working group was mentioned, and that's where Richard and I and Rebecca and some others have been coming from and working on. And we're going to be discussing as a group or a collaborative organization under the Age-Friendly Buncombe County. We're going to be discussing how we can help to promote ADUs and provide relevant information to people, and so that they can be help people see how they can be a viable option to support aging in place, as well as other things. So we're going to be continuing to work with the city and the county and others who are interested in addressing these things. And I'm going to hand this over to Richard to wrap up.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Linda. So first thing to mention, I think that, yeah, they're putting it in the chat box now, is that we created an ADU website on the UDI website. It's called Hope ADU, and it has a whole bunch of resources, including direct links to county websites, county online materials, Asheville online materials, and a bunch of the different rules and regulations as we understand them as well there. And Cole's website is on there, ARP website, whole bunch of materials. The publication that I featured partially in my portion of the show is also linkable there. You can download that as well as Cole's publication too. So that would be a great resource for people that want to find out more. And the other thing is that we'd love to be able to provide, due to some ARP support, some free assistance to individuals or households who are thinking about this, but may be daunted by the prospect of any aspect of it. Maybe it's design, maybe it's the zoning or the regulations, maybe it's the financing part, and help people take the next 2 or 3 steps sometime this fall, in the next month or so. So if people are interested, they can certainly contact me through our website. We also have that link up here as well. I believe Rebecca's probably putting that up, where it's a direct link to the page on our website. We can fill out a little form that'll get sent to us, then we can get back in touch with you to see how we can assist. So those are 2 great things I think that people can do, is find out more information. And then if you have some particular needs and questions right now, we'll be glad to help you with that.
Awesome way to wrap it up, Richard. And I think we definitely did justice to the much ado about ADUs. I'm just going to invite Cole to turn on his camera one last time so we can all just say goodbye and thanks for being together. This was a really great group. We'll hope to answer your questions following this event. Thanks for the inspiration, Cole and team. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.